The morning train came to a slow stop at Grand Central Terminal. Steam rose from the tracks as hundreds of people got off. Marcus Chen was one of them. He looked like any other person going to work. His clothes were simple, old jeans, a plain sweater, and a black coat that had seen better days. No one looked at him twice. Marcus carried an old leather bag on his shoulder. The bag was worn and scratched. It looked like something a teacher might carry. Not a man who owned 3 companies and had more money than most small countries, but that was exactly what Marcus wanted. Today, he did not want to be recognized. He walked with the crowd through the big station. People moved fast around him. Some talked on phones. Others looked at their watches. Many stared at their phones while they walked. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry. The sound of footsteps echoed off the high ceiling. Voices mixed together into a low hum that filled the air. Marcus had been coming to this station for 30 years. He remembered when he first arrived in New York as a young man with big dreams and empty pockets. Back then he took the subway because he could not afford a taxi. Now he owned 5 cars and a private jet. But today he chose to take the train like everyone else. The morning was cold. Winter air came in through the doors each time they opened. People pulled their coats tighter and walked faster to get warm. Marcus did not mind the cold. It reminded him of mornings long ago when he was poor and could not afford to heat his small apartment. As he walked through the main part of the station, Marcus saw all kinds of people. There was a woman in a business suit talking fast into her phone. She looked stressed and tired. A man in work clothes sat on a bench eating a sandwich. His hands were dirty from his job. 2 young people walked together, laughing about something funny. An old man fed birds that had flown into the station. Marcus watched them all. When he was building his business, he forgot to notice people like this. He was always in meetings or on his phone or thinking about the next deal. Success had put him in a bubble. He lived in a big house where he rarely saw his neighbors. He rode in cars with dark windows. He ate at restaurants where famous people went. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped being around regular people. That was why he was here today. Yesterday, his doctor had given him news that made him think about his life. The doctor said he was healthy, but he needed to slow down. You work too much, the doctor said. When did you last do something just for fun? Marcus could not remember last night. He had walked around his empty house. It had 20 rooms, but it felt cold and quiet. He thought about his mother. She had died 3 years ago while he was in Japan closing a business deal. He missed her funeral because his flight was delayed. That was the biggest regret of his life. His mother had taught him to play piano when he was a boy. They were poor. Then she worked 2 jobs to pay for his lessons. She said music would give him something that money could not buy. Music touches the heart, she used to say. It connects people. Marcus had not played piano in years. His big house had a beautiful piano in the living room, but it was just for show. Guests would see it and think he was cultured. But the keys were always dusty because no one ever played it. As he walked through the station, he saw something that made him stop. There was a piano in the middle of the room. It was not fancy. The wood was old and scratched. Some of the keys looked worn from many people playing them. A sign next to it said, "Public piano, please play." Marcus had seen this piano before, but he never paid attention to it. Today, something was different. Maybe it was thinking about his mother. Maybe it was what the doctor said about slowing down. Or maybe it was just being around all these regular people who reminded him of who he used to be. A few people sat near the piano eating breakfast. A janitor cleaned the floor around it. No one was playing. The bench sat empty, waiting. Marcus looked at his expensive watch. He had a meeting at 9 o'clock. Important people would be waiting for him. They would talk about buying another company. The deal was worth millions of dollars. If he was late, people would be upset. But for the first time in years, Marcus did not care about the meeting. He stood there looking at the piano and thinking about his mother. She had always wanted him to play for other people. Music is meant to be shared, she would say. But Marcus had been too busy making money to share anything. People walked past him in both directions. They did not know that the simple man in old clothes was worth billions of dollars. They did not know his face was on magazine covers. They did not know presidents called him for advice. To them, he was just another person, trying to get somewhere. Marcus liked this feeling. For years, people treated him differently because of his money. They were careful about what they said. They laughed at his jokes even when they were not funny. They agreed with him even when he was wrong. It was lonely being so important that no one treated him like a regular person. The piano bench was calling. To him, his fingers felt restless. He could almost hear his mother's voice telling him to sit down and play. She always said the piano would bring him joy when nothing else could. Marcus took a step toward the piano. Then he stopped. What would people think? What if someone recognized him? What if he played badly after all these years? His business brain told him to walk away. He had important things to do. Playing piano was a waste of time, but his heart told him something different. His heart remembered being a little boy sitting next to his mother on a piano bench much like this one. His heart remembered how music made him feel before money changed everything. Marcus looked around the station one more time. Morning rush hour was in full swing. Everyone was busy with their own lives. No one was paying attention to him. He made a decision that would change his life. Marcus Chun, billionaire businessman, walked toward the old piano like he was walking toward his past. The empty bench waited for him like an old friend. Marcus stood in front of the old piano for a long moment. His heart was beating fast. When was the last time he felt nervous about anything? In business meetings, he was always calm and in control. He made decisions worth millions of dollars without blinking. But now, standing in front of this simple piano, his hands were shaking a little. The piano bench was worn smooth by thousands of people who had sat there before him. Marcus could see scratches and marks on the wood. Someone had carved the word hope into one corner. Another person had written play with love in faded ink. These small messages from strangers made him smile. He sat down slowly on the bench. It creaked under his weight. The height was perfect, just like the piano bench in his childhood home. For a moment, he was 8 years old again, sitting next to his mother while she showed him how to place his fingers on the keys. Marcus lifted the piano cover. The keys were not perfect. Some were more yellow than others. A few had small chips, but they were clean and ready to be played. He pressed middle C with one finger. The sound was clear and true. This old piano had a good voice. Around him, the station was full of noise. People talked on phones. Shoes clicked on the marble floor. Trains arrived and left with loud announcements. But Marcus only heard the single note he had just played. It seemed to hang in the air like a memory. His mother's name was Rose. She had small hands but could make them dance across piano keys like magic. She worked in a flower shop during the day and cleaned offices at night. But every evening, no matter how tired she was, she would sit with Marcus at their old piano and teach him something new. Music is not about being perfect, she used to tell him. It is about feeling something and sharing that feeling with others. Rose never had much money, but she was rich in other ways. She knew how to find beauty in simple things. She could make anyone smile. She believed in Marcus when no one else did. Marcus pressed another key, then another. His fingers remembered where to go even after all these years. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. The body does not forget what the heart has learned. A woman walking past glanced at him. She was young and carrying a coffee cup. She looked tired, like she had been working all night. When she heard the piano notes, she slowed down for just a second. Then she kept walking, but Marcus saw her smile a little. That small smile gave Marcus courage. He placed both hands on the keys in the starting position for a song his mother had taught him. It was called Clair de Lune by a composer named Debussy. Rose said it meant light of the moon in French. She said it was the most beautiful song ever written. Marcus had not played this song in 20 years. But as his fingers found the first notes, it all came back to him. The melody was soft and gentle, like moonlight on water. His mother used to play it when she was sad or worried about money. It always made her feel better. As the first few measures of music floated into the air, something magical started to happen. The businessman who was yelling into his phone stopped talking. A mother pushing a stroller slowed down to listen. Even the janitor stopped mopping and looked over. Marcus did not notice them yet. He was lost in the music and in memories of his mother. He remembered the night she told him she was sick. They sat at the piano together, and she played Claire de Lune one more time. Her hands were weaker then, but the music was still beautiful. "Promise me something," she had said that night. "Promise me you will not forget to find joy in simple things. Money is good, but it cannot buy happiness. Music can. Love can. Helping others can." Marcus had promised, but he had broken that promise. After Rose died, he threw himself into work. He built his business bigger and bigger, thinking that success would fill the empty place in his heart. But the more successful he became, the lonelier he felt. Now, sitting at this public piano, Marcus understood what his mother meant. The music was bringing him joy that no business deal ever could. It was connecting him to something real and true. For the first time in years, he felt like himself again. The song was getting more complex now. His left hand played a gentle rhythm, while his right hand carried the beautiful melody. The piano responded well to his touch. Despite its age and wear, it had a warm, rich sound that filled the space around him. More people were starting to notice. A group of teenagers who had been laughing loudly grew quiet. An elderly man sat down on a nearby bench and closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. A security guard who had been walking his rounds stopped and leaned against a pillar. To listen, Marcus felt their presence, but he was not scared anymore. The music had taken away his fear. He remembered what his mother always said, "When you play from the heart, people will hear your heart." That was exactly what was happening now. The businessman with the phone had ended his call completely. He stood there holding his phone, forgotten, while he listened to the piano. His face, which had been tight with stress, began to relax. The music was working its magic on him, just like it was working on Marcus. A small crowd was forming, but they kept a respectful distance. No one wanted to break the spell that the music was creating. They could sense that something special was happening. This was not just someone playing piano. This was someone pouring his soul into the keys. Marcus played on, lost in the beauty of the moment. Each note carried a memory, a feeling, a piece of his heart that he had forgotten was there. The music was healing him, note by note, measure by measure. About all the important meetings he had missed this kind of connection. All the times he had chosen work over relationships. All the moments of joy he had passed by because he was too busy to notice them, but he was noticing now. And so was everyone else in the station who could hear the piano. The music was creating a pocket of peace in the middle of the busy morning rush. It was reminding everyone who heard it that there was still beauty in the world, still moments of grace to be found in unexpected places. Marcus smiled as he played. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. His mother would have been proud. As Marcus finished Claire de Lune, a gentle quiet settled over the small crowd that had gathered. The last notes seemed to hang in the air like morning mist. People looked at each other with surprised smiles, as if they had just witnessed something unexpected and beautiful. Marcus felt the silence and knew he could not stop now. His fingers were warm and ready. His heart was open. The piano was waiting for more. Without thinking too much about it, he began to play another song. This one was by Chopin, a composer his mother had loved even more than Debussy. The piece was called Nocturne in E-flat major. It started very softly, almost like a whisper. Marcus's right hand played a melody that seemed to float above the gentle rhythm his left hand kept. The music was romantic and sad at the same time, like a love letter written by someone who knew they would never see their beloved again. The small crowd grew larger. Word was spreading through the station in the quiet way that news travels when something special is happening. People did not shout or point. They just whispered to friends or gently touched someone's arm to get their attention. A businessman in an expensive suit had been rushing to catch a train. He was the kind of man who never had time for anything that was not making him money. But when he heard the piano music, his feet slowed down. Then they stopped completely. He stood there with his briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other, listening to something he had not heard in years. Music played with real feeling. Near the piano, a homeless man named Joe had been sitting on the floor with his back against a wall. Joe came to the station every morning because it was warm and because sometimes people gave him change. Most people walked past him like he was invisible. But now Joe was crying. The music reminded Joe of his daughter. She used to play piano when she was little. Joe had not seen her in 10 years, not since his life fell apart and he started living on the streets. But hearing this stranger play so beautifully brought back memories of sitting in his daughter's bedroom, listening to her practice her scales and simple songs. A young mother named Sarah was trying to calm her 2-year-old son who had been fussing all morning. Nothing she did made him happy. But when the piano music started, the little boy became quiet and still. He stared at Marcus with wide eyes like he was seeing magic happen. Sarah felt tears come to her eyes. She had been so stressed about being a new mother, but the music reminded her that there was still beauty in the world to share with her child. An elderly woman named Grace was walking slowly with a cane. She was 85 years old and had been coming to this station for 60 years. She had seen it change from a place where people dressed up to travel to a place where everyone was always in a hurry, but today felt different. Today felt like the old days when people had time to appreciate beautiful things. Grace sat down on a bench and closed her eyes. The music took her back to her wedding day when she and her husband danced to this same piece. Her husband had been dead for 5 years now, but the music made her feel like he was sitting right next to her. She could almost smell his cologne and feel his hand holding hers. Marcus played on. Unaware of all the individual stories his music was touching, he was focused on the piano and on the feelings flowing through him. But if he had looked up, he would have seen something amazing. He would have seen people from all walks of life standing together, united by the universal language of music. There was Maria, a nurse who had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. She was exhausted and worried about bills and her sick mother, but the music gave her 5 minutes of peace. 5 minutes where she did not have to think about anything except how beautiful it sounded. There was David, a college student who was stressed about exams and wondering if he would ever find a job after graduation. The music reminded him why he had chosen to study literature instead of business. Beauty and art were important too, even if they did not always pay well. There was Mrs. Chun, an elderly Chinese woman who spoke very little English. She did not understand most of what people said around her, but music needed no translation. The piano spoke to her heart in a language everyone could understand. A security guard named Tom had been working at the station for 15 years. He had seen everything: fights, accidents, people having mental breakdowns. His job was to watch for trouble and keep people moving. But today he found himself protecting something instead of stopping it. He stood at the edge of the crowd, making sure no one bothered the man at the piano. The music was getting more complex now. Marcus's fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence. He was playing from memory, but it was more than that. He was playing from his soul. Each note was connected to a feeling, a memory, a piece of his life story. The melody climbed higher, becoming more passionate and urgent. It was the part of the piece where Chopin let all his emotions pour out. Marcus felt the same thing happening to him. All the years of focusing only on business, all the relationships he had neglected, all the simple pleasures he had ignored, it was all coming out through his fingers. A teenager named Alex had been listening to music on his headphones, but he pulled them off when he heard the piano. The music from his phone suddenly sounded thin and artificial compared to this live performance. Alex had never heard classical music before, but something about it spoke to him. It was like discovering a new color or tasting a new flavor. Even the pigeons in the station seemed to notice. They stopped their usual pecking and searching for crumbs. Some of them gathered near the piano, tilting their heads as if they were listening too. The businessman who had stopped to listen found himself thinking about his own father, who had died when he was young. His father had always wanted him to learn an instrument, but he had been too busy with sports and later with making money. Now he wondered what he had missed by never learning to create something beautiful. Sarah, the young mother, looked down at her son, who was still mesmerized by the music. She made a promise to herself right then. She would make sure he learned to play an instrument. She would not let him grow up thinking that only practical things mattered. The music was building to its climax now. Marcus's hands moved with strength and grace, pulling sounds from the old piano that it might not have made in years. The melody soared above the crowd like a bird, carrying everyone's hearts with it. For these few minutes, the rushing world had slowed down. People remembered what it felt like to stop and appreciate something beautiful. They remembered that they were human beings, not just workers or consumers or people with problems to solve. The music was doing what Marcus's mother always said it would do. It was touching hearts and connecting people who had never met and might never meet again. The crowd around the piano was growing larger by the minute. What had started as a few curious people had become a gathering of more than 50 strangers, all drawn together by the beautiful music flowing from Marcus's fingers. People who would normally rush past each other without a second glance were now standing side by side, sharing something magical. Marcus had moved into his third song, Bach's Air on the G string. This piece was different from the others, slower, more peaceful, like a gentle river flowing through a quiet forest. His mother had played this song when she wanted to feel calm. Now Marcus understood why. The music seemed to wash away all the stress and worry that people carried with them. In the crowd, something beautiful was happening. Strangers were looking at each other and smiling. A well-dressed lawyer found himself standing next to a construction worker still covered in dust from his job. Normally, these two men would never speak to each other. They lived in different worlds. But now they exchanged a look of understanding, both moved by the same beautiful melody. Joe, the homeless man, was no longer trying to hide his tears. An older woman named Betty, who usually walked quickly past homeless people because she was afraid, saw Joe crying and felt her heart break a little. Without thinking about it, she sat down next to him on the floor. She did not say anything, but she sat there as a way of saying, "I see you. You matter too." Near the back of the crowd, Dr. Emily Rodriguez had been rushing to the hospital where she worked. She was already late for her shift, and she knew patients were waiting for her. But when she heard the piano music, she stopped. As a doctor, Emily spent her days dealing with sickness and pain. She rarely had time to experience anything beautiful. The music was like medicine for her tired soul. A businessman named Robert was supposed to be in a meeting that had started 5 minutes ago. His phone was buzzing with angry messages from his colleagues. But Robert could not make himself leave. He had spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder, missing his children's school plays and his wife's birthday dinners. The music reminded him of what he had been trading away for success. Sarah, the young mother, had tears streaming down her face. Her little boy was sleeping peacefully in her arms, lulled by the gentle melody. She thought about all the time she had felt overwhelmed by being a new parent, but watching her son's peaceful face while listening to this beautiful music, she felt a deep gratitude for this perfect moment. An elderly man named Frank sat on a bench with his eyes closed. Frank had been deaf in one ear since the war, but he could still hear the piano clearly. The music took him back to 1952 when he had returned from Korea and met his future wife at a dance. They had danced to this same piece. His wife had been gone for 3 years now, but for these few minutes, Frank felt like she was with him again. A group of high school students had been making noise and laughing loudly before the music started. Now they stood quietly, some of them experiencing classical music for the first time in their lives. One girl named Ashley realized she was crying and did not even know why. The music was touching something deep inside her that she did not have words for. Marcus played on completely, absorbed in the music. His expensive watch showed that he was now 30 minutes late for his important business meeting. In the old days, this would have made him panic. Missing meetings cost money. Time was money. Everything was about money. But today, Marcus discovered, something worth more than money. He was discovering joy. The batch piece required both hands to work together in a complex dance. Marcus's left hand played a steady, supporting melody, while his right hand wove a more intricate pattern above it. The two parts came together to create something more beautiful than either could make alone. It was like watching two people who loved each other have a conversation without words. A janitor named Carlos had stopped his work to listen. Carlos cleaned the station every morning before the rush hour began. He had been doing this job for 8 years, and most people never noticed him, but today, as he stood listening to the piano, several people in the crowd smiled at him and nodded hello. The music was making everyone more aware of each other. More kind Detective Linda Martinez was off duty, but had stopped by the station to catch a train home. As a police officer, Linda saw a lot of the ugly side of human nature. But standing here listening to this stranger play piano, she was reminded that people were capable of creating beautiful things too. It gave her hope for humanity. A businessman from Japan named Hiroshi did not speak much English, but music needed no translation. In his homeland, Hiroshi practiced meditation and valued moments of peace and beauty. Hearing this piano in the middle of a busy American train station felt like finding a temple in an unexpected place. The crowd was now large enough that people were having to stand 2 and 3 rows deep to hear the music. But no one complained about not being able to see. They were there for the sound, for the feeling the music created, not for a show. Tom, the security guard, had called his supervisor to report what was happening. Instead of being told to break up the crowd, he was told to let it continue as long as everyone was peaceful. Even the station management understood that something special was occurring. A pregnant woman named Lisa felt her baby kick when a particularly beautiful passage began. She placed her hand on her belly and thought about the child growing inside her. What kind of world was she bringing this baby into? The music gave her hope that it would be a world where beautiful things could still happen, where strangers could still come together in peace. Marcus began to notice the crowd during a quiet section of the batch piece. He looked up for just a moment and saw all the faces looking back at him. There were people of every age, every race, every social class. There were business suits and work clothes, young faces and old ones, people who looked wealthy and people who clearly struggled to get by. But they all wore the same expression: peaceful attention, gratitude, wonder. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was doing something truly important. In his business life, he made deals that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. But those deals helped some people and hurt others. This music was different. It was helping everyone who heard it, bringing them joy without taking anything away from anyone else. A college student named Mike had been stressed about student loans and wondering if his degree would be worth the debt. But listening to this music reminded him why he had chosen to study music theory. Beauty mattered. Art mattered. Creating something that could move people's hearts was worth doing, even if it did not make him rich. The batch piece was reaching its most beautiful section. The melody seemed to lift up toward the high ceiling of the station, carrying everyone's hearts with it. Marcus played with his whole soul, forgetting about everything except the music and the people sharing it with him. In the crowd, people were having small moments of connection. A businessman helped an elderly woman find a better place to stand. A teenager offered to hold a mother's baby so she could clap when the song ended. Strangers were being kind to strangers, all because the music had opened their hearts. Marcus played for nearly 20 more minutes, moving through pieces his mother had taught him years ago. The crowd stayed with him through every song, growing larger and more connected with each passing minute. Office workers called their bosses to say they would be late. Students skipped their first classes. Even some train conductors delayed their departures by a few minutes so passengers could finish listening. When Marcus finally played the last note of Chopin's Minute Waltz, his hands lifted slowly from the keys. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full of emotion and gratitude. For a long moment no one moved or spoke. They were all still lost in the beauty of what they had just experienced together. Then, like gentle rain starting to fall, the applause began. It was not the sharp, quick clapping of a concert hall where people clap because they are supposed to. This was something deeper, the sound of hearts saying thank you. The applause grew warmer and longer, coming from a place of genuine appreciation. Marcus stood up from the piano bench and turned to face the crowd for the first time. What he saw took his breath away. There were more than 100 people now, filling a large section of the station. Their faces glowed with joy and peace. Many had tears in their eyes. Some were still holding hands with strangers they had just met. As the applause finally faded, people began to approach Marcus. But they did not rush or push. They came slowly, respectfully, like people approaching something sacred. The first person to reach him was Joe, the homeless man. Joe's face was still wet with tears, but he was smiling the biggest smile Marcus had ever seen. "Thank you," Joe whispered. "I haven't felt this good in years. You reminded me that I'm still human, still worth something." Marcus felt his own eyes fill with tears. In all his business dealings, no one had ever thanked him like this. Money changed hands, deals were made, but no one's life was touched in such a deep way. Next came Sarah, the young mother, still holding her sleeping son. "You saved my morning," she said softly. "I was feeling so overwhelmed with everything. But your music reminded me how beautiful life can be. I want my son to grow up knowing that beauty like this exists." One by one, people came to Marcus with their thanks. The businessman who had missed his meeting said, "I've been so focused on making money that I forgot why I wanted money in the first place. To have a good life. You reminded me what a good life actually feels like." Grace, the elderly woman, took Marcus's hand in her wrinkled ones. "Young man," she said, "you have a gift. Not just for playing piano, but for bringing people together. In my 85 years, I've never seen strangers connect the way they did today." Dr. Rodriguez, who had finally made it to the hospital 2 hours late, had called in sick for the first time in 5 years, just so she could stay and listen to the entire performance. "I spend my days dealing with sickness and death," she told Marcus. "Today you reminded me that there is still healing and life and beauty in the world." Marcus was overwhelmed by the response. He had given these people a few minutes of music, but they were talking like he had changed their lives. What he did not understand yet was that he had changed their lives. And they had changed his. As the crowd slowly began to scatter, people exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet for coffee. The businessman and the construction worker discovered they both loved jazz and made plans to attend a concert together. Sarah connected with other young mothers who had been in the crowd. Grace was invited to dinner by 3 different families. A young man with a camera had been recording the performance on his phone. "Can I post this online?" he asked Marcus. "The world needs to see this." Marcus hesitated. His first instinct was to say no. He had spent so many years keeping his private life private. But then he thought about his mother and what she would want. "Yes," he said, "but please don't use my name. Let the music speak for itself." Within hours, the video was shared thousands of times. People around the world watched the mystery pianist bringing strangers together in a train station. Comments poured in from viewers who said the video had moved them to tears, inspired them to be kinder to strangers, or motivated them to pick up instruments they had not played in years. But Marcus never revealed his identity. Instead, he did something much more important. The next week, Marcus used his wealth to start a foundation called Music for Everyone. The foundation's mission was simple: to place pianos in public spaces all over the country so that moments like this could happen anywhere. Within a year, there were public pianos in airports, parks, shopping malls, and hospitals in 50 cities. Each piano came with a simple sign: "Music connects us all. Please play." Some of the pianos were played by professionals, others by children just learning their first songs. It did not matter. What mattered was that people had opportunities to share beauty with strangers. Marcus also began playing regularly at the Grand Central Piano every Tuesday morning. He never announced when he would be there, but word spread quietly among regular commuters. A small community formed around those Tuesday morning concerts. People brought their coffee and stood together, starting their weeks with music and connection. Joe, the homeless man, started coming every Tuesday. Other people in the crowd began to know him by name and would save him a good spot to listen. Eventually, someone helped Joe find a job in a small apartment. Joe said it all started with that first morning when a stranger's piano music reminded him that he mattered. Sarah enrolled her son in music lessons as soon as he was old enough. On Tuesdays, she would bring him to hear Marcus play. The little boy would sit perfectly still, mesmerized by the music. Just like that first morning, the businessman, Robert, quit his high-pressure job and took a position that paid less but gave him time for his family. He started taking piano lessons and played simple songs for his children. Every evening before bedtime, Grace lived for 2 more years, and she spent every Tuesday morning at the piano listening to Marcus play. When she died peacefully in her sleep, her family asked Marcus to play at her funeral. He played Claire de Lune, and there was not a dry eye in the church. Marcus never went back to his old way of living. He still ran his companies, but differently. He made time for music, for relationships, for moments of beauty. He kept his promise to his mother to find joy in simple things. Years later, when reporters finally discovered who the mystery pianist was, Marcus gave only one interview. "My mother taught me that music connects people," he said. "That morning at Grand Central, I learned she was right. We all need reminders that we're part of something bigger than ourselves." Sometimes the reminder comes from a song played by a stranger. The Grand Central piano still sits in the same spot. Every day someone plays it. Every day it brings a moment of beauty into the rushing world. And every Tuesday morning, if you know where to look, you might see a billionaire in simple clothes, sharing his heart with strangers, keeping a promise he made to his mother long ago. The music continues, connecting hearts one note at a time.